When one starts seeing the trivialities of life as trivial, one effortlessly starts finding beauty and solace in art, music, literature, cinema, nature, and poetry. And when one sees humankind's indulgence in these trivialities, one invariably turns to relatively pessimistic works of art as to share one's anguish with that of the artist. One of those works of art is T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land. It's sad but not surprising that the esoteric nature of this epic poem has limited its interest mostly between literary students and scholars. But I'd like to say that someone having given little curiosity in learning about human life, the world around us, and the future should at least give a try to one of the great 20th century poets' bleak vision of what the world might look like if we keep heading the way we are headed. In the effort of interpreting the poem, it's interesting to know that T.S. Eliot himself kept changing his own interpretation of the poem throughout his life. As there is no definitive interpretation, I'll try to give my interpretation along with the scholarly one. This poem is dedicated to Ezra Pound, who was one of the major figures in the early modernist poetry movement. T.S. Eliot calls him a better craftsman, quoting Canto 26 of Dante's Purgatory and also quoting the title of the chapter from Ezra Pound's critical work, The Spirit of Romance. The reason Eliot is calling him a better craftsman is because Ezra Pound meticulously edited and made significant changes in the poem. The epigraph of the poem, to which we will come to later, was earlier envisioned by Eliot to be the description of death of Colonel Kurtz in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. But Pound rejected that idea, and later the text of chapter 48 of Satyricon, written by Gaius Petronius in the 1st century AD, was decided to be its epigraph. Now this epigraph is written in Latin and ancient Greek and is untranslated in the poem, as if T.S. Eliot from the very first verse is shooing away anyone who has arrived to this poem just with mild curiosity. To understand this epigraph, one must know the story of Cumae Sibyl. In short, Sibyl was a priestess and Apollo granted her a wish in exchange for her virginity. Sibyl took a handful of sand and wished to live as many years as many the grains of the sand in her hand. As she forgot to ask for an eternal youth, her body started withering and grew smaller and smaller with age, and then she was eventually kept in a jar. Now the translation of the epigraph is this. With my own eyes, I saw that Sibyl at Cumae hanging in a bottle, and when the attendants asked her what she wanted, she replied, I want to die. Now this epigraph is apt for the following post for pessimism after the ultimate futility of vigor in the World War. The first part of the wasteland is named The Burial of the Dead. Usually, death is something with which a work of literature might end, but the wasteland starts with death. This stark contrast in outlook with other works of art will remain throughout this poem. The poem opens with these following lines. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. The month of April is usually associated with the return of spring, and poets and writers all over the world have praised the beauty of a sense of renewal the month of April brings. In Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, Chaucer opens with a description of the month of April as a time of renewal and pilgrimage. Eliot intentionally creates this contrast because in the wasteland, the month of April does not bring hope, but brings painful memories from the past. Breeding lilacs out of the dead land. The month of April is breeding lilacs out of the dead land, the infertile land where nothing worthwhile comes out. Lilacs, which is also a symbol of renewal, is seen here as some repulsive and unnecessary plant, mixing memory and desire. This line most clearly gives clarity to the preceding and following symbols. The month of April invokes the traumatic memory of past and also the desires for future. This desire April invokes is even more dangerous because past can be dealt with, but this desire, the same desire which has turned a forest into a wasteland, and the same desire is again returning as naturally as changing of seasons, as if the desire is completely unaware of the ramifications of the combination of great intelligence and giant ignorance of human beings, stirring dull roots with spring rain, rejuvenating those memories and desire and growing them to unforeseen consequences. And it's also worth noticing that the speaker here is not T.S.Eliot, but one of the wastelanders living in the wasteland. This might be the reason the poem is in free verse, as there is no reason to provide any kind of rhythmic joy. Next lines are: Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Here we see that winter is the season for warmth for the wastelanders, and unlike the renewal of spring, the lazy, static winter is more comforting. Covering earth in forgetful snow. Covering earth with snow that will cover and kill all that was springing out of the dead land, which will help us remain forgetful and ignorant of the past and future. Feeding a little life with dried tubers. A little life that we have and want will do enough with just the dried tubers in the snow-laden, dormant earth. In the next line, the speaker abruptly gets changed, as if this poem is a collective poem of all wastelanders. The following lines are spoken by a girl named Marie. Summer surprised us, coming over Starnberger Sea. With a shower of rain, we stopped in Colonnade and went on in the sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour. I am not Russian at all. I come from Lithuania, a true German. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousins took me out on a sled and I was frightened. He said, Marie, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. T.S. Eliot once met a woman named Countess Marie Lariche, who was also a second cousin of the Bavarian king Ludwig II, who drowned in the lake Starnberg under mysterious circumstances. These lines are likely an allusion to the mentioned person and incident. Summer surprised us, coming over to Starnberger Sea. Now Starnberger Sea, or Starnberg, is an actual lake in Germany. Now this change of speaker also brings a change of tone. The downbeat tone of the earlier speaker is changed and the new speaker's tone is relatively upbeat. The earlier speaker was quite apathetic about the summer which April brings and found himself comfortable in the dormant winter. There is a possibility that this earlier speaker is a relatively older person, somebody who has seen the war and what it brings. The later speaker, Marie, is maybe surprised by the fact that summer isn't anything like what her elders described. With a shower of rain, we stopped in Colonnade. Colonnade is actually a structure of classical architecture in which it is a row of columns supporting a roof or arches. Here again, the season that was perceived with repulsion by the first speaker in the line stirring dull roots with spring rain is contrasted with the line a shower of rain. The next lines are, and went down in the sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour. This line also shows the youthful glee that changing weather brings. Now there is a line in German language which is possibly spoken by the mentioned cousin of Marie. This line means, I am not Russian at all. I come from Lithuania, a true German. I think these lines can be more contextualized if we see that in World War I, Russia and Germany were on the opposite side of the conflict. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousin took me out on a sled and I was frightened. He said, Marie, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. Here Marie's quite enthusiastically recalling a warm memory from her childhood. She says she reads much of the night and goes south in the winter. Here she goes south in the winter, maybe to avoid the same stagnancy the earlier speaker found comforting. These lines, spoken by an apparently young speaker Marie, stands in stark contrast to the unenthusiastic and exhausted speaker of the previous lines.